Hello guys, happy 2025, happy new year. This is going to be my first video going up for 2025, which I'm so excited about. I hope you all have the most amazing Christmas, the most amazing new year, and welcome to today's video. Today we're going to be tier ranking every single book that I read in 2024, which I'm so excited to do. I think I've done one tier ranking video before, which was ranking every book that I've rated 5 stars. And I'm so excited to rate every single book that I've read. I think we're working with just under 100 books. In total in 2024, I read, I think it was like 92 or 93 books. I've also included the books that I actually DNF'd in this tier ranking, just so we have an overall view of the whole entire year. So that means that our book count, I think it's like a 98, maybe 96, it's just under 100. So we have quite a few to get through. First of all, let me talk you through my different tiers. We have 6 in total. The first one, which is at the bottom, is DNF'd or should have DNF'd. So this is any book that I DNF'd this year, or any book that I actually ended up finishing but that I wish that I DNF'd. Next we have Not My Cup of Tea. It's pretty self-explanatory. This is a book that I'm kind of glad that I read, maybe because it had a lot of hype around it, but it's a book that is just not my cup of tea. Like, I can see why people like it, but it's just not for me. Up from this we have It Was Okay. Again, self-explanatory. This is a book that maybe is a 3-star, but I find 3-star ratings really confusing in my head, I think. Because I feel like it's definitely split into lower 3-star ratings, which is like It Was Okay, or higher 3-star ratings, which is like I definitely recommend this, but it's not got that 4 or 5-star feeling for me. So the middle two are kind of like a 3-star rating. For me it's kind of like a lower 3-star or a higher 3-star. So for a lower 3-star we have It Was Okay. Then up from that we have I'd Recommend, which is a book, again, doesn't have that 4 or 5-star feeling. It is a book that I would definitely recommend and I think that people would enjoy. It's just not necessarily something that I personally overly connected with. Then we have the second from the top, which is Loved. Loved, a book that I just absolutely loved this year, but not one that has that top tier feeling. Because then we also have the top tier, which is all-time faves. So this is a book that has become one of my all-time favourite books, one of my all-time favourite reads, a book that I literally don't stop talking about, and that is one of my favourite books of the entire year of 2024. So they're all of our 6 tiers, and then we have all of the books down below. I actually don't know what order these are in, because I really thought they were going to be in the order that I actually read them, but these just seem to be in an absolute random order. So we're just going to work with what we've got. Okay, the first one we have is The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley. I'm going to put this one in It Was Okay. It was okay. I think I rated it like 3 stars. It's not one that I ever think about. I also remember it being quite weird. Like, it went down a really weird route. And part of it really reminded me of Saltburn. If anybody's seen that film, that's all I'm gonna say. But it was okay. It was okay. I usually really like Lucy Foley's writing. This is probably my least favourite that I've read by her so far. Okay, next we have Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. This one is the second one in the Part of Your World series, and I think I'm either going to put this in I'd Recommend or Loved. I think I'm going to put it in I'd Recommend, which might be kind of an unpopular opinion, but this one I definitely recommend, and I'd recommend this whole series, but it's not one that I overly connected to, and I really thought that I was going to. I don't know if my expectations were kind of too high going into this. I just connected with the other 2 in the series so much more, so I'm gonna put it in I'd Recommend because I still really enjoyed it, but I don't think about it as much as the other 2. Then we have The Mix-Up. Now this one, I'm not gonna lie, I don't really remember that much about this one, and it's one that I don't feel any kind of way to. I think I'm gonna put this in Not My Cup of Tea because I feel like it just wasn't that memorable for me. And I do remember listening to some of it on audiobook because I was kind of struggling to get through it. So I think we're gonna put it there. Either there or It Was Okay. But I feel like my gut instinct is telling me not my cup of tea. Then we have The Locked Door by Freida McFadden. This one, I'm gonna say It Was Okay. We know I love a Freida McFadden book. I love it. This is actually my least favourite Freida McFadden book that I've read so far. Don't really remember that much about it. I just kind of remember that I wasn't as gripped as I was in the other ones. And again, it just wasn't that memorable for me. It is still a Freida book, so it's fast-paced, easy to read. I'm gonna put it in It Was Okay. And then we have the Hunger Games series. First up, we have Catching Fire, which I think is the second one. This I'm gonna put in Loved. I loved this whole series. I loved it. Hunger Games, the first one, we're also going to put in Loved. I do think the first one could be an all-time favourite. That's a close one. I'm going to put it in Loved, but it is a close one. And while we're here, I'm just going to take Mockingjay and also put that in Loved, just so that they're all together. I literally read these books back to back and I couldn't get enough of this world. It was all I wanted to read at the time, and I just loved every single one of them, and I would definitely recommend it even if you've seen the films, because I'd seen the films before and just randomly decided to read the books, and I'm so glad that I did. Next we have Good Material by Dolly Alderton. This one, I'm gonna put in it was okay. It was okay. I really like Dolly Alderton's writing, but this story I feel like not that much actually happened. It felt a lot more kind of like a character study, and the character kind of annoyed me. Like the main character I just didn't feel any connection with, and it was literally just following him around his everyday life. That was basically what this book was. But some of the takeaways from that book I feel like were quite interesting. So I'm gonna put it in It Was Okay, Never Lie by Frida McFadden. This one of my all-time favourites, one of my favourites from the entire year of 2024, and definitely in my top 5 Frida McFadden books. I really, really enjoyed this one. I loved the wintry, creepy, eerie feeling that this one had. It was just really fast-paced and gripping. Okay, Frankenstein. This was the first classic that I read last year. First and only classic, I think. I find this one really hard to rate because I feel like my rating system is just so different for a book that's like this compared to like contemporary romance. I feel like this one really got my brain going. It was making me think a lot and think about things slightly differently. I thought it was a really interesting story, and I do still think about this book sometimes. I don't know if it's one that I absolutely loved. So I'm gonna put it in I'd recommend. If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. The way I wanted to love this book, I really thought that I was going to absolutely love it. I really liked the mystery thriller aspect, and I liked the twist at the end. I just could not get on board with all the Shakespeare references and the kind of drama group that was going on, and the amount of references that I feel like could have been so much more impactful for me if I knew what they were referencing. I'm gonna put this in not my cup of tea. It's one that I definitely can see why people absolutely love it, but it just wasn't for me. Then we have Alone With You in the Ether by Olivia Blake. I'm gonna put this one in I recommend. This is a bit of a weird one, I feel like, because it's really hard to explain what this romance love story is actually about. This one again feels very much like a character study, and we're studying these two characters and how they kind of come together and interact. And it's one that I took a lot from, but it's not one that I really think about that much. I wasn't absolutely obsessed with it. Twisted Love Story. I'm gonna put this in should have DNF'd. I actually finished this one. When I was halfway through I was thinking about DNFing it, but I actually finished it and I should have DNF'd it. I should have left it. Then we have Book Lovers by Emily Henry. I'm gonna put this one in I'd recommend. I think this is my second favourite Emily Henry book. Happy Place is my all-time favourite. I did really enjoy this one, but it's one that I don't remember that much about. I feel like I probably need to reread it at some point. But I also read Book Lovers and Beach Read really close together, and I kind of get them two mixed up, but I would definitely recommend it. Then we have The Housemaid's Secret. I'm gonna put this in loved. I loved this. This is the fastest book I've probably ever read. I just couldn't get enough of it. I absolutely loved it. Then we have Killer Instinct. Loved. Loved. You already know that I'm going to put the Natural series high up. You already know. For anybody that doesn't know, this is the second one in the Natural series. The second book is probably the least memorable for me personally. I don't know why that is, but I can't imagine what case they were working on. Like, I can remember bits of it, but it is probably my least memorable one. Then we have Beach Read. Again, Beach Read, I'd recommend it. Collide. I don't really remember a lot about this book. I remember it being quite similar to Icebreaker, but I didn't connect to the characters as much as I did when I read Icebreaker. It's one that I would probably recommend if you want an ice hockey romance, but I probably wouldn't recommend it over Icebreaker. That's the thing. So I think I'm going to put this in It Was Okay. None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. I'd recommend. I definitely recommend. Not one of my all-time favourites from the year, but probably in like my top 5 of Lisa Jewell books. There are definitely other ones that I preferred to this one. Then we have Just Like Magic, which is a Christmas book. I actually DNF'd this one just because the main guy character, the main love interest, was literally like Buddy from Elf, and that was just baffling to me. And as I was reading it, I just really wasn't feeling it. I wasn't vibing with it. So I actually ended up DNFing it. I don't know if it's one that maybe next year I'll be more in the mood for and I'll come back to. But for now, it's a DNF. Then we have His and Hers by Alice Feeney. I really enjoyed this one actually, but I don't really remember that much about it. I remember it kind of had a Naturals vibe and also really reminded me of the Mindfuck series at times. It's one that I definitely recommend, so I'm gonna put it there. Then we have Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. You already know I'm gonna put it. You already know. All-time favourites. This was a 5-star read for me. I loved the characters. I loved the situation they'd been put in. I just loved this book. I loved it, and it's one that I feel like I literally don't shut up about. Then we have Twisted Games. This one I preferred to Twisted Love, but I just don't think this series is for me, so I'm gonna put it in not my cup of tea. I really like the tension in this one between them, but then when they started getting together, I just kind of lost interest. I lost interest and it kind of made me cringe at that point. So I'm gonna put it in not my cup of tea. Then we have Tales from the Cafe, which is the second one to Before the Coffee Gets Cold. I loved this. I loved it. I just love reading about people and their connections with other people. And I feel like there's something so special about this series and the little cafe that they visit. I just love it. Then we have The Hike by Lucy Clark. This one had a real wintry feel to it. And I'm gonna say I'd recommend. I definitely recommend. All In, which is the third one in the Natural series, all-time favourites. All-time favourites. This was one of my top reads of the entire year. It's my favourite in the series. I just absolutely loved it. Loved the case they were working on. Loved that they were in Las Vegas. I couldn't get enough of this book. I literally couldn't get enough. In My Dreams I Hold a Knife. Now this one I feel kind of conflicted about because I actually rated it a 5-star, but I feel like a lot of that came from the ending and like how shocked I was at the ending. And I'm not sure that I would count it as one of my all-time favourites, but it definitely did have an impact on me. I'm gonna put this in loved. Fourth Wing. This one, I'm gonna say I'd recommend. I would definitely recommend it to people. I just didn't feel that connected to the two main characters. And some of the descriptions for things, like the trials that they were doing, I honestly found it so hard to imagine them and I don't really know why. But I will give extra points for the ending because the ending got me. Literally got me. But even with that, I'm not sure that it was enough to make me want to read the second book. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. But the first one with the dragons and everything and the powers, I would definitely recommend it. Then we have Let's Split Up. This one I'm kind of conflicted about because I really like the premise of this and I like the whole Halloween vibe, but I feel like I was really hoping for more twists and turns in this one and it felt kind of younger than usual YA that I'm used to reading. So I think I'm going to put this one in It Was Okay. I feel like it was a really fast-paced, easy read. War D by Frida McFadden. All-time faves. All-time favourites. This is probably my favourite psychological thriller ever. Definitely my favourite by Frida McFadden. It's honestly a top tier book in my opinion, just for enjoyment, for how gripping it was, how easy it was to read, and just the whole environment. I absolutely love anything set in like prisons or psychiatric wards or working with criminals in any way. I'm obsessed with it. So this one was right up my street and just the twist that she threw in there, I was gripped. I was gripped. The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. I'm gonna say I'd recommend. I would definitely recommend this one. Not one of my favourite Ashley Postons, but I still enjoyed it and I feel like there were some messages that I took away from it as well. The XX. This one was really fun. This was really fun. I think I'm actually gonna put this one in loved because it was just a good vibe. It was exactly what I wanted. It had a real nice witchy Halloween vibe. Reminded me a little bit of Practical Magic, if anybody's seen that film, which is one of my favourite films, and there were elements of this book that gave me Practical Magic vibes and I just had a lot of fun reading it. The Teacher by Frida McFadden. This one might be kind of controversial. I feel like this book gets quite a lot of hate just because of the topic that it focuses on and it is quite dark and unsettling, but I really enjoyed it. The plot of this one, I was gripped. It literally got me out of a reading slump just because of how hooking it was throughout the whole thing, and I actually think this is one of my all-time favourites. Which I just already know is going to be controversial, but I really enjoyed it and it's one of my favourite Frida McFadden books that I've read. Then we have Hits Different. This one, it was okay. I really liked the representation in this one. It didn't massively have summer vibes to me. I don't know if that was just a me thing. I felt like I learned a lot in this book about the main character and her experiences, but it wasn't one that I necessarily connected to or think about that often. Then we have Heartless by Elsie Silver. Again, probably another controversial opinion because I know that this is so many people's absolute favourite in the series. I personally didn't love this one. I think the single dad trope just doesn't do anything for me. It just doesn't. And I just found that I was cringing a lot throughout this book, but it is probably one that I would still recommend because if people absolutely love that trope then I would recommend it. I think it's more just a me thing. It's just a me thing. So for that reason, I'm gonna put it in I'd recommend because I still would, but it's not one that I absolutely loved. Then we have The Yearbook. This one really reminded me of Dash and Lily on Netflix, but not Christmassy. Make it not Christmas. And it really reminded me of that. I think I'm gonna put this in It Was Okay because I don't really remember that much about it and it's not one that I really think about, and I might still recommend it, but it's not one of my go-to recommendations. Okay, The Road Trip by Beth O'Leary. This was okay. This was okay. I don't know, would I recommend it? I probably would. I'm gonna put it in I'd recommend. It was fun. It did take a bit of a weird turn, but I did really enjoy finding out about these two characters, and I remember really enjoying the past timeline especially. I think the present one was the one that went a bit crazy. Just some weird things were happening, but it is one that I'm glad that I read, and I would still recommend it, I think. Why is it so hard to narrow these down into tiers? Okay, Archer's voice. Oh God. I hate to say it. I hate to say it. This one just was not for me, and it was such a shame because it was one that I thought that I was going to absolutely love, and it's one that has so many elements of a romance that I love in a book, but I couldn't get on board with it. I found it way too cringy, and it's one that I considered DNFing, but I was already over halfway through the book because it started off quite strong, but I don't know what happened in the last half or so. I don't know. I think I'm gonna put this in not my cup of tea because it is one that I'm glad that I've read, so I kind of don't wish that I DNF'd it, but it's definitely not my kind of thing, but it's one that I can see why people absolutely love, if that makes sense. Then we have Bad Blood, which is the fourth one in the Natural series, and I loved this. I loved it. Is it one of my all-time favourites? I think I'm gonna put it in loved. The Housemaid's Wedding. I feel like this is the most unnecessary novella I've probably ever read. Like, what was the point? I kind of liked that we got more of Millie and Enzo, but at the same time, I kind of just felt like it was unnecessary. I'm probably going to put this in It Was Okay, because if you want to read more of Millie and Enzo, then I would still recommend it, but I don't feel like it was a necessary read for me. Okay, The One That Got Away by Charlotte Rickson. Oh, I really liked this book. This was such a nice surprise read for me. I'm going to put this in loved. Loved. It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. I'm gonna put this in not my cup of tea. Again, this is one that I just found too cringy. I feel like both characters in this book I just didn't get on with that much. And it started off quite well because I really liked the main guy character, and then when they got together, too cringy for my liking, too cringy. If Only I Told Her by Laura Nowlin. This one is the second one to If He Had Been With Me, which is one of my all-time favourite books. And I'm gonna say loved. Loved. I liked that we got more of their story. I really, really liked the friend's perspective that was put in here, and I didn't expect to like that as much as I did. And I would honestly read endless amount of pages with Finney and Autumn. I just love them. I love them. Then we have The Gift by Freida McFadden. Probably the weirdest book that I read this year, honestly. I just feel like maybe this just wasn't necessary for me to read. I'm gonna put it in should have DNF'd, even though it was a novella, so it was so short. So I don't think it would have been worth DNFing. I'm gonna put it there because it was unnecessary for me to read. Like, it was a weird one. It was a weird one. Okay, Invisible Girl by Lisa Jewell. I think this is the one that was set around Valentine's Day, but I'm not sure, which shows how much of an impact it had on me. I don't remember that much about this one, but it is still one that I would recommend as like a fast-paced thriller, and especially if you want a thriller that's set around Valentine's Day, then I would recommend it, but not one that's overly stuck with me. Then we have The Naturals. I'm gonna put this in all-time favourites just because this book has a special place in my heart. It's literally where it all started. I just remember feeling so excited for the rest of the series after I read this one. I just loved getting to know these characters, and this is just where it all started, and it just makes me so happy. Then we have Flawless by Elsie Silver, which is the first one in the Chestnut Springs series. I think I'm gonna put this one in... I really don't know. I really don't know for this one because I did like it more than Heartless, but I don't know whether it's one that I absolutely loved. I think I'm gonna put it in I'd recommend. I remember getting really into this one at the time that I was reading it, and I think this couple is probably one of my favourites that I've read about so far in this series, but it's not one that I necessarily think about that often, and I didn't feel overly connected to these characters, but I would still recommend it as a cute little cowboy romance. Then we have One by One by Freida McFadden. This one I definitely recommend. I would definitely recommend. Very easy to read. If you need something to get you out of a reading slump, this is one of my go-to recommendations for people just because it's so fast-paced. But it is quite a basic thriller plot, if that makes sense. So it's not one that necessarily stuck with me massively, but it is one that I do recommend. Then we have The Boyfriend, also by Freida McFadden. I'm gonna put this in loved. Again, just a really fast-paced, easy-to-read thriller. The Widow's Husband's Secret Lie. I don't really remember much about this little novella. It's a satirical novella, so it's a bit different to anything else that I've read. I'm not sure that it's one that I would necessarily recommend, so I'm gonna put it in It Was Okay. It Was Okay. Reckless by Lauren Roberts, which is the second one to the Powerless series. I absolutely loved this one. I was kind of hoping for more of the fantasy element in there and to learn more about what was going on the fantasy side. But I do think this was a lot more romance driven, but I'm okay with that. I was absolutely loving it because I feel like we got what we were waiting for with Peyton and Kai, and we finally got to see them together and actually interacting and having time together, especially with the way that it ended. I feel like that was needed, and I actually really like that we got the time with them. And I read this one super quickly. I think I'm gonna put this in loved. Once Upon a Broken Heart, the first one in the series. Again, it's going in loved. I always describe this one as a fever dream, and that is literally what it was like reading it. So chaotic, but a lot of fun, and I really like the kind of whimsical vibe to it. Then we have Things I Wanted to Say But Never Did by Monica Murphy. This one I actually DNF'd. I got about 50% of the way through, which is a good chunk of it considering it is such a chunky book, but I couldn't deal with it anymore. I just couldn't. Magnolia Park's Into the Dark. This one of my all-time favourites. I just love Magnolia and BJ. I love their story. I love that we got the final part of their story. And this one has just made me so excited for Daisy Hates, the third book, to come out, because the things that they were hinting at in the background of this one, crazy. I just already know it's going to be an insane read. Seven Summers. I'm going to put this one all-time faves. This is my go-to summary book recommendation. I loved this one. I felt so connected to the characters. I was just rooting for them the whole entire time, and I really like seeing how things changed over each summer, and it's one that I definitely still think about. Then we have Powerful, which is the little novella. I'm actually going to put this in all-time faves. There was just something about this book that I really connected with. I was just so invested in Adina and Mac, and it was just so heartbreaking, but I'm really glad that we kind of got to see Adina's perspective of everything after getting to know her in the first book. Love in the Time of Serial Killers. This one should have DNF'd. I had such high hopes for this one, but I feel like nothing really happened in this book, so we're gonna put it in should have DNF'd. The Maidens. I'm gonna say it was okay. It was okay. This is a dark academia thriller. I feel like I don't really have that much to say about this one, which I feel like says it all really. If We Ever Meet Again by Anna Huang should have DNF'd. I just really didn't like either of the main characters in here. I was cringing throughout, and about 40 pages in, something like that, I really wanted to DNF it, but I decided to give it a fair chance. But it wasn't for me. Snowed In by Catherine Walsh. This one I'd recommend. I think it gave me more kind of wintry vibes than necessarily Christmas vibes. It was a fun, easy read. I just wished they'd been snowed in for a longer amount of time, because that's kind of what I was expecting going into it. Funny Story by Emily Henry. Again, I'd recommend. I enjoyed this one. Could Have Gone by Taryn Fisher. This one started off so strong. I was absolutely loving it, but the way that it ended and like the twists, it kind of fell flat for me. So for that reason, I'm gonna put it in it was okay, which is a shame because it did start off so strong. Then we have The Worst Best Man. I actually DNF'd this book. It just really wasn't what I thought it was gonna be, and it just felt like it was taking such a weird turn, and it just wasn't what I was looking for at the time, so I ended up DNFing it. Then we have The Reappearance of Rachel Price. I loved this. I loved it. It has a really similar vibe to A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, and I just love anything that Holly Jackson writes at this point, honestly. Then we have Powerless. This is, of course, one of my all-time favourites. It was my favourite book of 2024, and it's one that I don't stop thinking about. It's one that I don't stop talking about. I just loved it. I loved every second of it. Tom Lake. This one, not my cup of tea, which is a shame because I had really high hopes for it, but it just wasn't what I thought it was going to be, and I felt very kind of disconnected from it and kind of frustrated reading it. Okay, next, I Wish You Would. I loved this. I loved it. Such a good YA summary romance. Powerless by Elsie Silver. This was my most anticipated one to read in the series because of Jasper, and it started off so well. I was loving it. I was kicking my feet, I was giggling, and then just the spice in it ruined it for me. I just think this could have honestly been a 5-star read for me if the spy scenes hadn't taken the turn that they'd taken. It just kind of made me cringe and really like brought me out the story. I would still recommend it. I feel like I would recommend this series in general. Then we have Light Lark. This one, again, I'd recommend. I really like the vibes of this world and the sort of power and the curses situation. It just wasn't what I thought it was going to be going in. I kind of thought that it was going to be this island that reappears every 100 years and that these people have to go on to fight to the death essentially in these trials. But the trial part of it was actually kind of minor, and it was much more focused on breaking this curse. So it kind of wasn't what I was expecting going into it, but I do like the vibes of it, and I like the vibes of this world. Merriment and Mayhem. This is a Christmas novella. I feel like I don't really have any feelings towards this one. So I'm gonna put it in It Was Okay. It was okay. 7 Year Slip. All-time faves. All-time faves. I love this book. I love it. Do No Harm. This one I did actually DNF, and that is purely a personal thing. Just the fact that my anxiety was just going through the roof reading this book. And I remember on like the second or third page, something really weird happening with the main character, and I just thought, I've had enough. I've had enough already, and we're literally on page 3. So I can't actually speak for the rest of this book because I didn't get very far in at all. But for my personal experience reading the first couple chapters, that was enough for me. That was enough. Then we have Binding 13 by Chloe Walsh. This one I feel like I have so many mixed feelings about because the characters in here are so good and I felt really connected to the characters. But the actual book itself, I found that it was quite repetitive, and that's what was kind of putting me off getting the second one in the series. So I'm gonna put this in I'd recommend because I definitely would, and I know that so many people absolutely love the series and connect with it so much that the repetition of certain scenes or certain moments between them doesn't matter because you just love these characters so much. And I have definitely considered getting Keeping 13, which is the next one, but I'm just scared that it's going to be repetitive, kind of like the first one was. So that's why I have kind of mixed feelings about it, but it is definitely one that I would recommend. Then we have Daydream. I loved this book. I loved it. This is definitely one for the Taylor Swift book girlies, and it's definitely one of my favourites in the Maple Hill series so far. Then we have 12, which is the little novella. I'm gonna say I'd recommend. I feel like it's hard to rate novellas, but I did really enjoy this one. I like that we got to see them a few years on, and I also really like that we got to see each natural when they were 12 years old, and we got a little snippet of their childhood, but then also we got where they are now and after reading Bad Blood, like how everything ended up. Next we have Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter. This one was dark. This one was dark. Definitely check the trigger warnings for this one if you want to go into it. I think I'm gonna put this in I'd recommend. It was a little bit on the long side for me, and I don't feel like it needed to be as long as it was. So it is one that I would recommend as a thriller, but it is also one that I would say be careful going into it, just because some of the scenes and some of the things that happen were quite dark. 1,000 Broken Pieces, which is the second one to 1,000 Boy Kisses. I think for me personally, I should have DNF'd this. I should have DNF'd it. I really struggled to get through this one. I found it was one of those that nothing was really happening, and it was just very, very heavy on grief. And I don't tend to absolutely love books that focus on grief. I don't mind it as kind of a subplot and a thing that they're talking about and representing, but when a book is mainly just focused on that, it just kind of gets really overwhelming for me to read, and I just don't really enjoy it. Which I probably should have thought about going into this because I knew who it was following. But I thought going into this that it was going to have more of a romance aspect thrown in there as well. And there was that a little bit, but I just found it very overwhelming. And it's one that I struggled to get through, so I do wish that I had DNF'd that one. The Ballad of Never After by Stephanie Garber, which is the second one in the Once Upon a Broken Heart series. This one is one of my all-time favourites. Why can I not drag that up there? Oh my... Okay, there we go. I loved this book. I loved it. It was probably the book of 2024 that gave me the biggest book hangover, honestly. Next we have CHATTY. This one I would definitely recommend. I definitely recommend. Can't speak for the rest of the series because I didn't get past the first book, but it is one that I have definitely thought about the rest of the series and thought about getting the next one. I think it's just because there's literally like 10 books that intimidates me. But I really like the vibe of this. I really like the main character, and I was definitely intrigued. I was definitely intrigued by the rest of the series. Then we have A Curse for True Love. This one I'm gonna put in loved. Feel like I did still have a couple questions at the end of this one. But I still really enjoyed it, and it was just what I needed after Ballad of Never After. Then we have The Inmate by Frida McFadden. This one, again, I think I'm going to put this in loved. I do wish we'd got more of the prison setting, but it was actually the past timeline in this one that I was absolutely loving and I found really interesting. Then we have A Novel Love Story by Ashley Poston. I'm going to put this one in It Was Okay, which is such a shame, actually, because I had such high hopes for this, and this one, the premise of this one was so book coded and it was such a fun idea, but just the way that it was done I didn't absolutely love. I don't really remember much about this book, which I feel like says a lot, and it just wasn't my favourite. Then we have Cinnamon Bun Bookstore. I think again I'm gonna put this one in It Was Okay. I really thought this was going to be very autumn vibes, but it was actually set in summer, which I feel like the cover of this one was so misleading. Again, I don't really remember that much about this one. It was just a quick, easy, fun little read. Not one of my go-to recommendations. Then we have The Hunting Party, which was actually my first read of 2024, if I remember correctly. This one, again, I'm gonna put it in It Was Okay. It was okay. I don't really remember that much. I don't. I remember that it was set on New Year's Eve, which is why it was the first book that I read in 2024. Other than that, I don't really remember that much about this. I do vaguely remember the vibe of it, and I did like the vibe of the lodge that they were all staying in. But other than that, wasn't that memorable for me. Then we have The Housemaids Are Watching. I think I'm gonna put this in Loved. I actually really enjoyed this one. I liked seeing Millie in a bit of a different light. I liked seeing her and Enzo. I liked seeing where she was in her life a few years after The Housemaid's Secret. And I feel like the situation that Freedom McFadden put her in just made it so different from the first two as well, which was really nice to read. I just really enjoy reading about Millie as a main character. I just think she's great. And I love her internal dialogue. She literally just makes me giggle. And we have Countdown to Christmas by Jo Thomas. This was my favourite Christmas read that I read this year. And I'm gonna put this in Loved. Loved the vibes. Cozy, Christmassy, little snowy village that makes maple syrup. Like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding? Just the perfect Christmas vibes. Okay, You and Me on Vacation by Emily Henry. This one... Okay, first of all, I listened to this one. So I listened to it as an audiobook. I don't know whether my experience would have been different if I'd read the physical book. I just did not like this one. I just didn't get on with it, and I really wanted to. I don't actually tend to mind the miscommunication trope too much, but in this book, I don't know what it was. It was too much for me. It was too much for me in this book. And I feel like we were waiting the whole time to find out why they weren't friends anymore. And when we got to that point, it was just so underwhelming. So I think I'm going to put this one in Not My Cup of Tea, which is a surprise. It's a surprise to both you and me. Because it's an Emily Henry book, so you'd think that it would be higher than that. But this is probably my least favourite Emily Henry book that I've read. However, having said that, I am still really interested to see what it's going to be like on a screen. I think it's going to be a TV show or a movie. And I am still really looking forward to that coming out because I think it would work really well on a screen. My experience reading the book, I just couldn't get on with it, but I don't know whether that was partly because it was in audiobook form as well. Okay, The Mother by T.M. Logan. I should have DNF'd. I just didn't get on with this one. I didn't get on with it. I felt quite frustrated reading this. Then we have Heartstopper Volume 2. I'm going to put this in Loved. I loved this. I've only read the first two in this series, but I'm so excited to continue it. I feel like this whole series is just good vibes. It's just good vibes, and I love reading about them too. They're so cute. Then we have Rock Paper Scissors by Alice Feeney. I'm going to say I'd recommend. I definitely recommend this one. I like the whole setting. I like the vibe. I like the eeriness to it. But I remember still having questions when I'd finished this book and being kind of confused. Then we have One Christmas Eve. I loved this book. Why can I not see all of these? If I just zoom out, will that help? Okay, it helped a bit. Then we had The Love of My Afterlife by Kirsty Greenwood. This one honestly makes me chuckle even just thinking about this book. I absolutely loved it. I don't know if it was one of my all-time favourites from last year. I kind of think maybe it was. I'm going to put it in all-time favourites because it was just a good vibe. It was just a good vibe, made me giggle, was just a really uplifting book that I really enjoyed. Then we have Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. This one of my all-time favourites. And this was a surprise one for me because I don't tend to gravitate really towards the age gap trope. But I feel like it worked really well in here. I liked how the characters felt very real and genuine, and how the situations that she put them in felt very real and authentic. Then we have Bodies by Christine and Frody. I actually really enjoyed this one. I think I'm going to put this in Loved. It was a different read. There was something quite sinister feeling about this one. I don't know if that's the right word, but it just had an undertone of something darker was going on. And like I said, it was just different to anything else that I read, and I did really enjoy it. Then we have Wind in the Willows. This was one of my all-time favourites of 2024. I loved it. Literally nothing but good vibes, this book. It's literally like Sylvanian families come to life and we're hearing little stories about their adventures and what they get up to. And I loved every second of it, and the illustrations are so gorgeous, and I feel like just really make the book as well. Then we have By the Orchid and the Owl. This one I'm gonna put in It Was Okay. This one had so many good things about it, but I feel like the execution of all those things put together just wasn't my favourite. So I'm gonna put it in It Was Okay. And then we have Heartstopper Volume 1, which I'm gonna put in loved. I loved it, and I'm really excited to read the rest of that series. And there we have my tier ranking of all the books that I've read in 2024. Let me just zoom out so you can see the whole thing together. That's so crazy seeing them all like that. I can't believe that that is like 90 something books. It doesn't even look like that. But there we have every single book that I've read. That's crazy. And that brings us to the end of this video. Thank you so much for sitting down with me, having a little chit chat about all the books that I read in 2024. I really, really hope that you enjoyed watching. Please let me know if you did. And also please let me know your favourite reads of 2024 because I'd absolutely love to know. And thank you so much for just being here, and I will hopefully see you in my next video.